والسلام على رسول الله وصحبه ومن والاه. Beginning with Allah, praise be to Him. Send peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his family and companions of mine. Bear witness that there is no God but He alone, without any partners. He is the only worthy of worship, and that Muhammad was His last slave and messenger. All right. Actually, we had some questions from a previous, from first class, I believe, right, Ahmed? Yes. Okay. Okay. So let's go through the questions, inshallah, and then we'll get into this class. So, question one: why should we work for this world at all if it's useless at the end of the day? I want to ask you guys this question. Let's see who's been paying attention. Why should we work for this world at all if it's useless at the end of the day? Any guesses? Yeah.
I wasn't here last week, but I would think, like, if you don't do any work in this world, then how are you going to get the money to, like, let's say, build mosques, help people who need it, or basically practice what the religion is telling you? If you do have power, how to use it in the right way.
Okay, very good. That's definitely part of it. Yes. What else? What else? What did we talk about? This was the first week, by the way. What did we talk about? We talked about doing things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how that is the contention that every single person should have in any single thing that they do. And if you do things for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then ultimately your actions are at a loss because they're not for the sake of Allah. So then how do we understand this? Because we're living in this world, so what does that mean? Our 70, 80, 90 years here we're living, what is it? Just a waste of time then? That's not the case, right? So like you said, the world is not useless. That's the first and most important thing. The world is a means to achieve something greater. Okay, so all of our time that we spend here, it's supposed to be building up to our ultimate goal. Now what happens is if you make this world your ultimate goal, then you've lost it all. Then you've lost the plot. Then you need someone to come and really help you, reorient you and get you to think a little bit straighter. But you guys can come closer if you want. Yeah, you guys can come closer, no problem. But don't worry, I don't bite. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَابْتَغِي فِيمَا أَتَاكَ اللَّهُ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. And this is the point that we want to focus on here. That Allah is saying, and He's telling the Prophet here, and really all of us, that seek through what? Through the means which Allah has given you in this life. What do you seek? Hereafter. And why is it important here to specify the means? Because every single person has different levels of abilities. Some people have more time, some people have more wealth, some people will have more mental capability, some people will have more emotional capability, some people will have a proclivity towards this, propensity for that. And all these different things means that Allah has given each and every single one of you a different mean. But what's important is the means that you have been given is sufficient for you to achieve the hereafter. So that's why Allah is telling you to seek the hereafter, seek the reward of the hereafter through the means that Allah has given you. Okay, that's number one. What does Allah follow this up with? وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. But don't forget your share of this world. Don't forget your portion of this world. So He's not telling you strive and strive and strive and strive in the akhirah and leave the world entirely. Quite the contrary. He's telling you have a portion of this world, and this portion needs to be realized also. How do we realize it? Well, follow the life of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ said, لكني أصوم وأنام لكني أصلي وأنام وأصوم وأفطر. He says, and he's telling us here how to be a balanced type of people, right? Not to be people who are extreme to one side or the other. He's saying, and I pray and I sleep. And why is this the case? Because there are some people at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they decided, you know what? I'm just going to pray. Like, this world is not for me, right? I want something much greater. And so all I'm going to do is pray. And there are instances of particular companions who they actually did this. And they had wives and they had families. And what would happen? They would leave their wife, they'd leave their family, and they wouldn't go out and work, and they wouldn't go after their portion of this dunya, that which Allah has written for them. And instead, they would just go to the masjid and pray all day and pray all night, and they would neglect their other responsibilities. And so the wife of this person came and she went to the Prophet ﷺ and she said, my husband's not giving me my due rights. He's always praying. He's always praying. Imagine someone coming to these in this time and complaining, my husband's always praying. SubhanAllah, we have like the opposite. We have the opposite problem now, right? People are coming and saying, my husband's not praying, my wife's not praying, this or that. But it shows that opposite extremes, they're both bad. Like, don't think that one extreme is better than the other. They're both things that we need to avoid, and we need to follow the way of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ reprimanded this man, and he said, listen, you can't just be in the masjid praying all day. You have to go provide for your family. You have to go work. You have to be there for your wife, emotionally, physically, support her. You have to be a father for your children. You have to contribute to society. All these things are important. Like the brother said, how are we going to build the masajid? How are we going to invest in the Muslim community? How are we going to become strong people if all we do is sit in the masjid and pray and we don't focus on anything else in this life? No, it's important to be a strong Muslim, right? The believer that is strong is better and more beloved to Allah than the believer that is weak. And this means in all aspects. What do you define strength? Your iman is obviously the core of it, right? Your belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also your ability to give back. The giving hand is better than the hand that takes. This is also a concept. That it's better for you to be the one giving in charity, giving in knowledge, giving in ability, giving in your time, giving in your help, as opposed to being the one that's just constantly taken, not because you're not able to, not because Allah hasn't given you the ability to do so, but because you choose to dissociate yourself from that. And so that's one important thing. And there are also other aspects in this world that perhaps don't benefit us directly in terms of the worldly sense, but they actually provide direct benefit to other people while still providing benefit for us in the akhirah. What's an example of this? Something that is at very little cost to yourself personally, it doesn't really benefit you that much, but it benefits someone else greatly. And on top of that, your reward in the hereafter is that much greater. What's an example of this? It's an example of this, guys. Come on. An example of something that perhaps doesn't yield much benefit to you in this life. Perhaps it's something that comes at a very little cost to you, but it provides great benefit to other people, and the benefit to you in the hereafter is also very great. Okay, teaching, yeah. The teaching could come at a great cost to you, right? Like you could take a lot from your time, from your effort, from your preparation. Something even more simpler than that. Giving water. Giving water, sure. Smile. A smile, there you go. Smile.
Treating people with simple respect.
Treating people with respect. Giving someone a Quran. Making dua for people. Planting a tree. All great examples. How about obedience to your parents? Imagine your parents are old and they need help now. And these are your parents. If you go and help your parents physically, are you going to benefit a lot from it? Like, is it going to give you some sort of extra strength, some sort of extra money, some sort of extra this or that? Not necessarily, right? You may get some emotional, and you should really get some emotional satisfaction out of it because of the love you have for your parents, but it's going to benefit them a lot, right? It's going to benefit your parents a lot. Perhaps they need this extra support that you're giving them, this extra strength, this whatever it is. Maybe they just want to see your face. They just want to see their son's face. They just want to see their daughter's face, and that'll make their day. And on top of that, you will be given so much in terms of reward in the hereafter. So much. I don't know why the guys who are like cluttered in the corner. You guys want to make space for the brothers? You guys are sitting a little bit awkwardly. Okay, so this world is definitely not useless. This world is far from useless. Everything you do is for a reason, and everything has its decree, and everything has its place. And it's quite a perfect balance, actually. And we need people to do their part in this world and be strong Muslims in society and give back to the Muslims in terms of knowledge, in terms of financial, donations to build masajid, to provide homes, to provide shelter, to take care of people, to provide food and water, all these different things. But the point is, don't let that become your goal. Don't let this dunya become your goal to the point that you forget the hereafter. That's the point. So the dunya is far from useless. Okay, I hope that clarifies that. Another question. How do we know if we are doing enough for the akhirah? How do we know if we're doing enough for the akhirah? Okay. I don't know exactly what you're trying to, whoever asked this question, I don't know exactly what you mean by this. In general, don't get too caught up in things that are out of your control. Like how much this, how much that, is this enough, is that? Like at the end of the day, if I sit down with you and I tell you, do you know what you're doing is correct? And everyone will have an innate feeling, right? There's a fitrah that we have in us as well. If you do something, you'll have some feeling of this is correct or this is incorrect because Allah has placed that in you. If you're doing something wrong, then you'll have a feeling, you'll have that feeling of guilt. You'll have that feeling of, I shouldn't be doing this. You know, it's not pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you're doing something right, you'll also have that feeling of, you know, alhamdulillah, I feel good about this. I feel happy about this. I feel relieved about it, right? If you pray, for example, and you may find it to be difficult to pray. We have a busy life, and you may find that sometimes it's difficult, and then you get caught up in other things. But what happens if you don't pray? You're going to feel guilty. It's just a natural feeling in you. And so you just got to do your best to fulfill that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded you to do. And as long as you do your best and you try your best and you're sincere in your intentions, and we spoke about sincerity, then inshallah, you stay on that path and you're sincere in obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're sincere in following the path of the Prophet ﷺ, then this is the straight path. And you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't let your deeds go to vain then, or be in waste. Okay. Last question. You spoke about the ayah in Surah Talaq, but how can we practically implement that in our lives? Okay, what was the ayah in Surah Talaq? Remembers. وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. And then? ويرزقه من حيث لا يحتسب ومن يتوكل على الله فهو حسبه إن الله بالغ أمره. Okay. قد جعل الله من كل شيء قدرا. What does this mean? How can we practically implement that in our lives? Okay, so this ayat, well, it's actually two ayats. They're very structured in a particular way. Okay, it starts off with what? The sequence starts off with وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ. So the core of whatever you're doing is to have taqwa in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you don't have this taqwa in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then nothing else will follow. You have to have this basic sense of taqwa and belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What will happen as a result of this? يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Okay, so how can we practically implement this in our life? How can we practically implement this in our life? Sometimes you'll find yourself in a situation that is a little bit restricted, or you find yourself a little bit constrained, or that there's some sort of pressure on you, right? I'm stuck in a corner. I'm backed up in this corner. I don't know where to go. I don't know which door to open. I don't see any opportunities for me. The point is here that you have true taqwa in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, true faith, true belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once you have that belief, Allah will follow it up with granting you a way out. يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Allah will give you a way out. And we spoke in the first week as well. This way out does not need to be the way that you imagine. In fact, it very well may be a way that you never imagined. وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And He will provide for you in ways or from sources that you could not even have thought of. Just think about that for a second. This doesn't mean that I want to get something and I'm not able to get it, and that means the only way for me to be happy now is to get that thing. No, that's the wrong way of thinking. Allah can provide for you a way out, and He can provide for you in ways that you wouldn't have imagined. So, for example, sometimes a simple shift in your personality, not your personality, your mentality. Sorry? Your attitude, right? Your perspective, your attitude, your mentality. A simple shift in your mentality, although your situation is the exact same, but just you changing your mentality will change your whole outlook on things. Is that not the case? You could be in the exact same situation. And I'm sure we've all seen examples of this, where we're sitting here in this privileged institution, in this country that gives us our rights, and we have a home, and we have hot water, and we have food, and we have shelter, we have clothes on our back. And we're sitting here and complaining. And then we have people who are much less fortunate than us in places like Palestine, in places like Syria, like Yemen, like Somalia, like Rohingya, like the Uyghurs in China, all these places. And they have so much less than us. But if you go to them, and wallahi, I've seen examples of this, you'll speak with them, and they'll be so content with what they have. And you'll look at them and be like, how is this possible? I have so much more than you in terms of material items, in terms of wealth, in terms of this, in terms of that, in terms of security. Yet you're more thankful than I am. Yet you're happier than I am. That's because Allah provided for them a way out. Allah provided for them a way out of their mental misery, of their mental depression, that they inflicted upon themselves by what? By not having the reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Really, it comes down to this. Of course, Allah can provide for you ways out in other ways as well. Financially, physically, emotionally, mentally, whatever the case may be. But oftentimes you'll find that the root of the problem is actually up here, what you have sitting in your head, your unrealistic expectations, or your lack of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you have that trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll understand that anything that Allah has written for me is good. Allah decreed for this to happen for me. That means there must be good in it for me. And that's the mentality that will allow you to escape all these sadnesses and all these miseries that you encounter in life. Really, that's what it comes down to. And so I think that's a practical way you implement it in your life. You start focusing on your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you stop focusing on seeing some sort of monetary outcome, some sort of materialistic outcome. Because like we spoke about in the first lesson, the scholars commented on in terms of what you get in the world. And they said, you may get it sometimes, but there are other times where you won't get it. Right? من كان يريد العاجلة عجلنا له فيها ما نشاء لمن نريد. That whoever wants this fleeting world will give of it a portion, like whatever we want of this portion, to whomever we want. And so some people will get the portion, and some people will get a constricted portion, and some people won't get anything. Does that mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't fulfilled his duty towards you? Like, is that what we're going to start saying now? And be ungrateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No. It just means that's the reality of life. And perhaps we're focusing on the wrong things. And that's what's causing us to then feel sad about this or feel, constrained in this way or that way. And so that's what it comes down to. And sometimes it's difficult, right? We have this concept, really, wherever you go in society, wherever you look, it's all materialism. And people want things now. Like, you order something, I want one-day shipping, right? This is why people like Amazon. It's a prime same-day shipping. Actually, I live in an area where they only have 2-day shipping. Oh man, you guys are so behind. You don't understand. You guys are not tasting the true life, right? This is what happens. I went to my uncle in Germany, and they had same-day shipping, same-day Amazon shipping, and I was wow. I was like, I have to wait 1 day for this item. You get it the same day. That's incredible. But when you start focusing on all these things too much, that's what causes you to really stray from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why you see it. If you look at all these celebrities and big name figures, they're the most depressed people on the planet. How many times do you hear stories? This celebrity, that celebrity, their net worth is 10 million, their net worth is 100 million. What did they do? They committed suicide, or they started taking drugs and they overdosed, now they end up in the hospital. Like, it just goes to show money is not what you're after in this life. That's not going to get you anywhere. And you're going to feel constricted and restrained, regardless of how much money you have, if you don't have that reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These people, they don't have anything. These celebrities, these big name figures, these rich businessmen or whatever they are, they're chasing something that is meaningless, like completely meaningless, if not used with the correct intention in the correct manner for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, that's going to yield unfavorable results. There's no doubt about that. And like we said last time as well, the quote that the smart man learns from his mistakes, but the wise man learns from other people's mistakes. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us examples in the Quran. So we learn from the mistakes of previous nations, and we learn from the mistakes of those around us, so that we don't fall into the same mistake. And then later on we go and say, oh my God, look what I've done to myself. No, avoid that from the start. Avoid that from the get-go. Realize where your true intentions lie, where your true purpose lies. Your purpose in this life is not for the sake of this life. You're just a traveler on the way to something much greater. I hope that answers that question. Any question before we start for today? All right, alhamdulillah. So, first class we spoke about sincerity and intention. The second class we spoke about what? We did speak about Bani Israel, yes, but that wasn't the core of our class. All right.
The mistake.
Sorry?
The mistake they did.
The mistakes they did, okay. What did their mistakes result in?
The heart.
The heart. What happened to their heart?
Hardened.
It hardened. The hardening of the heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described this as a punishment. That the worst of punishments they could have got as a result of all of their misguidance and all of their bad deeds and all of their disobedience, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished them by hardening their hearts. So it became like the hardness of a rock or even harder than a rock. Because verily, from rocks spring water. And you split a rock and water will come out and rivers will flow from it. But their hearts are even harder than that. So now what we want to talk about today is we want to classify the heart into 3 groups. All right? We want to talk about 3 types of hearts. And what it looks like to be in that state of heart, not state of mind, state of heart, subhanAllah, and the symptoms of that heart, and perhaps then how you can get out of that. Okay, the first is what? Let's actually see if anyone can guess it. What are the 3 types of hearts? And these are the 3 types of hearts that Ibn Qayyim talks about. What are these 3 types of hearts? The dead heart is one of them.
Sick heart.
The sick heart is another one.
Not the live heart, living heart.
The alive heart, yes. We'll call it the healthy hearts. MashaAllah. 3 for 3.
I said.
I also heard. It's okay. This is life science anatomy. Okay. All right. So we'll start off with the healthy hearts. Okay. The healthy hearts, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. That on that day, on the day of judgment, your wealth and your children will not benefit you except those who come to Allah, those who stand before Allah with what? بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. With a sound heart, with a healthy heart. Okay? And now we want to talk about, okay, what does this mean? What does it look like to have a healthy heart? This means that this is the heart that is cleansed from any passion that challenges what Allah commands. Cleansed from any passion, anything, period, that challenges that which Allah has commanded. Just think about this for a second. How many times do people, and this is where we need to look at ourselves and look at our own relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many times have we done something that we knew Allah has commanded otherwise, but we found that we had some sort of drive in us, some sort of motivation, some sort of passion to go against that. Like we have some sort of reason to disobey our Creator. Where does this come from? Seriously, like we need to ask ourselves these questions. Okay, let's take 5 minutes and then we'll break from here. You know what? If anyone needs to make a we'll make it now. We'll pray. Good. Okay. All right. So due to time, we're going to just talk about the healthy hearts, and then we'll end there. Inshallah, we'll save the dead heart and the sick heart for another time. But we'll try to go in depth in healthy heart, inshallah. Okay. So we said what? That the healthy heart is cleansed from any passion that challenges that which Allah has commanded. Okay. So it's free from any impulses that contradict Allah's will, that contradict what Allah wants, that contradict what Allah has ordained. What does this mean ultimately? What is the bottom line here? Like, what's the most important thing in your life? What's the greatest sin? Shirk. So the healthy heart is protected against that. It's safeguarded against worshiping anything that other than Allah and against following anyone other than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay? And again, when you say Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, everyone say sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as Ibn al-Qayyim says, and he says it quite eloquently, in Arabic, obviously, it's much more eloquent than the English translation. But even the English translation, it's pretty eloquent in itself. So he says, its services are exclusively reserved for Allah, willingly and lovingly, with total reliance, relating all matters to Him in fear, hope, and sincere dedication. So everything that you do is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You reserve yourself for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You save yourself for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't want to get tainted by obeying anyone else. You want to save that for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Out of what? Out of your love for Him. So you're doing it willingly and lovingly. And you're doing it with total reliance on Allah. And this is what we just spoke about. وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. You're doing it with absolute, total reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Relating all matters to Him. That means anytime you do something, you think to yourself, am I doing this for the sake of Allah? You ponder and you're sincere with yourself, first and foremost. If you're not sincere with yourself, how are you going to be sincere with anyone else? So you ponder to yourself, am I doing this sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Out of what? Three things. Nobody mentions fear, hope, and sincere dedication. Because you have to fear Allah. And this is not an unhealthy type of fear, contrary to what some people may think. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not ever oppress His slaves. He doesn't oppress us. He doesn't harm us. Allah wants us to do the opposite. He wants us to come to Him. He loves us. He wants us to run towards Him. And it is this healthy relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where we fear Allah, so we respect the boundaries that Allah has in place for us. And that's why we read the Quran. And that's why we understand the names and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are very important. And that's why we go towards understanding Him. And also having hope. Why is hope important? What happens if you don't have hope? You despair. If you don't have hope, you despair. So if you commit a sin now, what does Shaitan come and tell you? Can't get forgiven. Shaitan comes and he whispers this, right? You're too far gone. You've committed too many sins. Just stop. Just don't even try anymore. You've already taken one step here. Take another step, take another step. All of a sudden, you're a mile away from where you started. Because this is the trick of Shaitan. And that's a lack of hope, a lack of understanding who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. How are you going to understand Allah if you don't understand His attributes? You have to understand the hope. This hope exists. That when you do a sin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I'm close to my servants. I hear the call of my servants. I reply to my servants. I reply to my slaves. This is the hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran. And so have that hope. And then the sincere dedication. That means your intentions are absolutely pure for the sake of Allah. Ibn al-Qayyim continues. When it loves, i.e. the heart. Okay, anytime I say it now, it's referring to the heart. When it loves in the way of Allah. When it detests in light of what Allah detests. When it gives for Allah. When it withholds for Allah. Notice here, everything that you love now, and we know the hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes the sight that you see within the basically everything that you do, right? It's a long hadith. But everything that you do and everything that you feel, you start feeling it in light of wanting to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you love something, you don't love it for yourself. Because ultimately your desires are fleeting. What you desire is fleeting things. You desire things in this world that are temporary. You love it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves it. That's why you love it. And when you hate something, you don't hate it for yourself. You hate it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates it. Allah hates for you to do this. He doesn't like for you to do this, or He loves for you to do this or this. And your actions follow as a result. When you give for the sake of Allah. And when you withhold for the sake of Allah. So when you're contributing your time, in your wealth, in your knowledge, in your skill, you're doing all of that for the sake of Allah. And whenever you withhold something, again, it goes back to doing it for the sake of Allah. And none of this will suffice. So even if you do all of this, everything we just mentioned, none of it will suffice if you take anyone other than the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a guide. So the one with the healthy hearts dedicates it, i.e., he dedicates his heart to the journey's end, and he does not base his actions and speech on any other person than Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Allah says in the first ayah of Surah Al-Hujurat, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, la tuqaddimu bayna yaday Allahi wa rasulihi wattaqullah, inna Allaha sami'un alim. Which basically means, oh, you believe, don't put yourselves above or in front of Allah and His Messenger, and fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is all hearing, all knowing. And so this, what this really means is, do not speak of a matter until Allah has spoken regarding it, and do not act until Allah has commanded it, right? So you don't place yourself and you don't place your desires above that or ahead of that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger have decreed for us. And we know in many other places in the Quran, obey Allah and obey His Messenger. How do you expect to obey Allah and how do you expect to obey His Messenger if you're placing yourself and your whims and your desires ahead of that which Allah has commanded, right? And this may mean different, some things different to us right now compared to what it meant back then, but the point still stands that when you do things, check to make sure, is this something that Allah has actually ordained? Or is this something that Allah has not commanded me to do and I'm just doing this, but I'm really contradicting my religion, or I'm contradicting my prophet, and I'm not following the footsteps of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm not following the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's how we purify our hearts, right? Everything that you do in your life, and it becomes very simple for you, by the way. Once you get to this point, you love to do this now. It becomes your day in, day out. This is what you're doing. Everything that you do, you become so focused on pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you have no problem canceling something that would have otherwise displeased Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the sake of pleasing Him. And you have no problem doing something that would have otherwise displeased Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, for the sake of pleasing Him. And so some of the Salaf, they would say, the Salaf are the predecessors. So basically the generations following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because the Prophet sallallahu said that the best generation is his generation, and those who follow him, and those who follow him. So they would say that there is no action, even if it may be small, except that 2 records will be unfurled for it. Okay? Who can guess what these 2 things are? Alhamdulillah. Who can guess what these 2 things are? And any action that you do, regardless of its size, there will be these 2 things that will really be the essence, like the questioning points of the action. Intention, okay, so why you did it, your intention, okay, and what's the second thing? What's the second thing? Knowledge, okay. Your howness. How did you do it? Why did you do it? And how did you do it? So that's correct. How did you do it? And we'll explain that in a second. So the first thing is, why did you do it? Did you perform this action for the sake of your master? Did you perform it for the sake of your Lord? Or did you perform it for some personal gain? And this should be something that you ask yourself anytime you do an action. Why are you doing what you're doing? Are you doing it so that people can look at you and say, oh, I'm donating. Oh, look at me. I'm so generous. I'm so this. I'm so that. I'm praying my sunnah. Look at me. I'm so righteous. I'm doing my adhkar out loud so that people can hear me do it. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or are you doing it for other than Him? And if you're doing it for other than Him, this is a musibah. This is a huge calamity. It's a scary thing, because then you're starting to chase the people, and you want them to be pleased with you, and you want them to be happy with you. And if you do it consistently to a greater extent, it can even become shirk, because now you're not even praying for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're literally praying for the people now. That's literally what your intention has become. You're not even worshiping your Lord anymore. You're worshiping the people. You want to look good in front of the people. But the believer doesn't care what the people think. He cares what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thinks. That's the state of the believer. And Allah tells us this, that people who have true belief, they will do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ tells us this, that, and particularly in the end of times, the Islam began as something strange and is going to return again as something strange. So you had the period before the Prophet ﷺ where they were pagans. There was no Islam. And what happened? They persecuted the Muslims. Is that not the case? They persecuted the Muslims and they made their lives live in hell and they treated them horrible. And then Muslims became powerful and dominant by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet's saying that it's going to return at one point. And perhaps we're at that point now where Islam again is looked at as something strange, where we have Islamophobia around us, where Muslims are persecuted and beaten because they wear hijab, because they grow a beard, because they pray, because they do this, right? And that's the reality that we're living in. But what did the Prophet ﷺ say? So give glad tidings to the strangers. You're a stranger here because people look down upon it, the fact that you're a Muslim. But give glad tidings to the people who hold on to their religion in these difficult times, because that proves that your intention is for the sake of Allah. And we ask Allah to purify our intentions. That's the whyness. Now we go to the how. Was the action that you did from the actions that has been legislated upon the tongue of Rasulullah ﷺ? Or was it an action that Allah did not legislate or that Allah is not pleased with? How are you doing this action? Did the Prophet ﷺ tell you to do it in this way? Did Allah tell you to do it in this way? Or are you doing it in a different way, just so that you can make it more fun for yourself or more this or that? And ultimately, this is corrupting the action, right? You have to have the correct intention and you have to also perform the action in the correct way. So the first question pertains to the sincerity or the ikhlas. And the second question or the second concern pertains to the following, the howness, which would be called the mutaba'ah, like Abdullah said, right? So Ibn al-Qayyim says that Allah does not accept any action unless these two prerequisites are met. So if you don't have these two things, if even one of them is missing, then Allah will not accept your action. This is what Ibn al-Qayyim is saying. So you got to make sure your intention is correct and your methodology, the way you're doing it is correct. You can intend to pray Fajr, but you can't pray Fajr with 3 rakats, right? That doesn't work. It just won't work. You can't pray with 1 rakat, even though you're intending to pray Fajr. So the howness has to be correct as well. That's very important. So the method of absolution from the first question is to purify one's sincerity such that it is done for Allah alone. And absolution means freeing yourself from fault or from punishment. Okay? So you want to be saved from the punishment, you want to be saved from all these negative consequences, then do it for the sake of Allah alone. And the method of absolution for the second question is to actualize the following of the Prophet ﷺ, thereby securing the heart from any intent that would impair its sincerity and any desire that would impair its following. Okay, is that clear? Any questions? Okay, now the final question then is, any questions like that? It's not a fun thing. The final thing then that we want to focus on is the core concept of all of this. Okay, what does Islam mean?
Submission.
Submission, right. In Arabic, it comes from the root of submission. Islam means submission. That's what Islam means. And the core of that is obedience. So you submit yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you don't try to object or ask questions or anything like that. Why? Because Allah created us and we're His slaves at the end of the day. Like, we need to understand this point. If Allah says something, then we must do it without questioning. This is the deepest form of submission. Like, you completely submitted your will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's never an instance where you place your own will or your own mind over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You understand what it means to be an obedient slave to your Lord. And the way we understand slavery is like, and obviously it has negative implications in this time, but the master, if the slave disobeys him, the master gets angry. So now just imagine how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would feel when we disobey him, when he is the only one who has any right to be worshipped, and he has a right upon us to worship him and to fulfill our obligations upon him, and now we're sitting here and we're being disobedient and we're not submitting ourselves. You don't call yourself a Muslim when you don't submit yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's the core meaning of it. And so you need to follow that, you need to embody that. You can't just say I'm a Muslim, but I don't want to do anything that Allah asks of me. So what are you doing? It's like, it's not This Islam is not a label that you place upon yourself. It's a way of life. It's the way you see things. It's the way you view things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, actually before that, we give the example of Abu Bakr alayhi salam. Who was the greatest companion? Who was the closest one to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Was Abu Bakr. And why was that so? What was his nickname? As-Siddiq. Which means what? Right. The truthful, the trustworthy. In what way? In the way that he believed and he thought to be true anything that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, anything that Allah said. When the Prophet sallallahu went on Isra Mi'raj, when he went on his night journey on the Buraq and he went to Palestine, Masjid al-Aqsa, and he came back, and the Quraysh were like, "You're a liar, you're this or that," even though he proved it to them, not only by him actually saying it, but also by other people that came later on. The Quraysh went to Abu Bakr and they told him, like, "Can you even believe your friend here?" They knew he was the friend of the Prophet. They're like, "Look at this guy, he's crazy." And Abu Bakr said immediately, without any hesitation, "If the Prophet said it, then it's true. If Muhammad said it, it's true. I have no doubt that it's true." Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He did not doubt it for a second. He submitted himself. And this was the methodology that they had. They had this methodology, sami'na wa ata'na. Like whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say, whatever the Prophet ﷺ would say, we hear and we obey. We don't second guess. We don't try to contort or misdirect or anything like that. We hear it as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us it, as the Prophet ﷺ told us it, we obey and we follow it in that way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it in the Quran. The people that say this, that sami'na wa ata'na, we hear, we obey, those are the people who are successful. And Allah says in a different ayah, وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. Okay? That it is not for a believing man or a believing woman when Allah and His Messenger decree a matter to have any other choice in that matter. And it's really unfortunate that in the society we live in, people view this as, "Oh, that means you're being oppressed. Oh, that means your rights are being taken away from you. Why are you wearing this? Why are you praying like this? Why are you talking like this?" Surely this is a form of oppression. Surely it's infringing on your freedoms, on your rights, on your ability to do things. And that's so wrong. That is so wrong. And we as Muslims need to control this narrative. We need to tell it absolutely not. Absolutely not. I have submitted myself. I have submitted my will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because I understand what that means. And I'm not doing it blindly. I understand my Lord. I understand what it means to submit myself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I understand the implications of it. I understand what I'm going for. You want to have all your freedoms in this world and you want to live. You want to live in this life and just, have this gratification and fulfill your desires and satisfactions. Then you'll get that. But it's a fleeting thing, really. It's going to run away from you. It's not going to stick with you. But if you do things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's what we understand this verse, that it doesn't mean that we're oppressed or that we don't have right. Quite the contrary. You obeying your Lord is the most freeing thing in this world because He knows you more than you know yourself. And you can take a simple example and look at civilization. And look at all the different civilizations in human history. Just look at the West right now, for example. How often do they change their rules? How often do they change their own morals? You go to one civilization and they'll have a completely set of morals than another civilization, right? Is that not the case? Like in some areas, it's completely moral for them to abuse people or to burn people alive or to, like in the pagans, what they would do. They would bury their daughters alive. What a horrible act. But that was the norm of their thing. That was their morals. They had no problem with it. They viewed it as something acceptable. Now, if you come here and you suggest this, the people that are not Muslim, they'll say, "What kind of act is this? This is horrific." But then what do? They do a whole bunch of other acts that are completely against the morals of previous generations, right? And so the morals are always going up and down. We don't have that. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said it for us. And Allah has created us and He knows us inside out. And He has legislated for us X, Y, Z. This is the correct way. And that is so freeing. Because you don't need to rely then on your own intuition, your own this and your own that, because that's not going to yield much. You rely on that which your Lord has given you. That is the true submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So understanding that and being happy in that, what will that yield? A healthy heart, a sound heart, a happy heart, being content with your Lord, not being displeased with anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded for you. Understand that sometimes you may not see the wisdom, you may not see the vision. If there's a TV, we can probably see a pixel of that. And there's millions and millions and billions of pixels. And we just see a very tiny portion that is our reality. And we can't comprehend that which is much greater. So we should actually be thankful that Allah is telling us what to do and laying out for us the correct path and the correct way. Because otherwise we'd be completely lost. And that's what it means to submit yourself.
Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're talking about like your freedom and stuff, like I saw something that said, would you rather be a slave to your own desires or be a slave to Allah? What would you rather do?
Exactly. You're going to be a slave to something. Would you rather be a slave to something that is changing, something that is not permanent, something that has no knowledge, something that doesn't know? What you possess in terms of strength and knowledge amounts to nothing. Absolutely nothing. Or would you rather be a slave to the most powerful, the creator, supreme Lord, Malik al-Mulk, the owner of everything, the king of everything? Really, it doesn't take much to make that decision, right? It's in our fitrah as well. That's what it means to really submit yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is the healthy hearts. We'll end there, inshallah. If anyone has any questions, yes. Yes.
Does that also attribute to the hadith that when we do things, we should do it to the best of our ability?
Yes, because the Prophet ﷺ told you to do that. The Prophet ﷺ, that's the point, right? You do things in the way the Prophet ﷺ has taught us to do things. And the Prophet ﷺ has done, the path is laid out for us. And for those of us who think that, oh, you know what, I've completed the sunnah, you're wrong. There are so many acts of worship, so many ways of doing things that the Prophet ﷺ did, so many extra ibadat, so many this, that, and the other, that we haven't even gotten to yet. And so do it in the way the Prophet ﷺ has done it, for surely that is the way of following the path of the Prophet ﷺ. That is the closest thing to following the Prophet ﷺ. And when the Prophet ﷺ says, I don't know if the hadith is you're referring to is Allah loves for the slave if he does something to perfect it. And that's part of your religion. So when you're praying, perfect your prayer. Do it in the best way you can. The Prophet has told you how to pray. He told you, what do, right? How to have khushu', how to do this, what to say, what your action should be. Do it to the best of your ability. Be perfect in the way, because at the end of the day, what do we talk about? Having good character, right? And being good with other people, being respectful and good in our dealings and this and that. This is your dealings with your Lord. Who has more right for you to have perfect relations with him than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So perfect your acts of worship. Do them to the best of your ability. And perfect, well, you can argue perfect is not achievable, etc., etc. That's not the point. The point is you're doing it to the best ability, right? You have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you capability. Do it in that way. Do it sincerely, in the best way that you're able to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not hold you, will not burden you for anything beyond that, inshallah. Any other questions? That's so funny. Sunnah smile, okay. His brother has a healthy heart. Okay. أقول قولي هذا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك صلى الله على محمد والحمد لله رب العالمين.